Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us with the meeting of the Baltimore City OIG Advisory Board. This meeting today, September 11th, is dedicated to the HR requirements and processes for the evaluation of the OIG. As such, I'd like to table the reading of the minutes and any other business we have until after the completion of the HR presentation. Could I get a first on a second on that one, please? Thank you. Okay. With that said, I'd like to introduce Amy. And also, I'd like to introduce you to the board. So, Amy, could you give us your full name and your job title? Yes, please, right there.
Good afternoon. My name is Amy Butwin, and I'm the Senior Manager of the Department of Human Resources. It's the Department of Shared Services. And today I am joined with our Director and Chief Human Capital Officer, Quentin Herbert, and the Chief of Shared Services and Recruitment, Joanne Ashton.
I'm Gail Guilford, retired Chief of Information Security Officer, Baltimore City, and Chairperson of the board.
Mike Down.
Nicole Breon.
Could you come up, Ralph? We can't hear you.
Lauren DiMartino.
Ralph Pasueno.
Hello, I'm Ronald Weich.
Gary Williams.
Raymond White.
Jim Godey.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. And we have a quorum, so let's go on with the presentation. Hello, sir. You as well.
We did provide a presentation. If we could get that up. All righty. We are going to walk through the city's performance management process, the procedures, the current form that we use, the competencies that are looked at, and how performance evaluation is conducted today. First, let's talk about the sections of the performance assessment form itself. And the first part of the performance management assessment are the goals of the employee. And every employee across city government, not just in MAPS, now sets SMART goals within the Workday system. SMART goals, as we know, are goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. Those goals can be tied to specific competencies of the job. The next section is the competencies. Those core competencies, there are a list of core competencies for each employee, and then there are 2 additional leadership competencies for people leaders. And we'll get back a little bit more detailed into that momentarily. And then the last component of the form is the professional development plan. And while this does not weigh on the ultimate score for the performance appraisal, it is very important. And the reason that we did not weigh it is, it's a good reason. And the reason is because we want our employees, particularly our people leaders, to have professional development and to not be penalized through their performance appraisal if they don't meet a professional development goal because they are actually doing the work, right? So doing the work is the most important, but we do want particularly our people leaders to set professional development goals so that they can continue to be up on best practices in the industry and the like. Next slide, please. And this, if you have magnifying glasses, you can see this. What this is the actual spreadsheet form, which is the performance evaluation form. And everything that I just said, from the goals to the competencies to the professional development, those are here on this form. There's also the recordation of the mid-year evaluation and the end-of-the-year evaluation. All of those must be completed and signed by the employee and the employee supervisor each year. And that's to ensure that the employee has had the opportunity to review that assessment from the supervisor. In this instance, it's a board, and we'll talk about how that works in a minute too, because I'm quite sure there are some questions, because this is a bit unique in the structure and how performance management would be conducted. Next slide, please. And as we discussed, the way that the performance is weighed is the performance goals and achievement of the goals is weighted at 50% of the evaluation, and the performance competencies, or how well the leader or the employee exhibits those core competencies, is weighted for the remaining 50% of the overall performance evaluation scoring. And so the next few slides really just highlight and blow up so that you can see and understand that form that we showed you in the very small slide. So if you go to the next slide. And here at the top of that form, we have the employee and the supervisor information is recorded on the form. In section 1, we have the position description acknowledgement. The position description defines what the work of this particular classification does, right? So the PD, or professional or position description, outlines what the position really does, the work that the position really does. And then the PM life cycle sections, whether this is a beginning of the year meeting where you sit down and set those goals and have those expectations shared, whether it's the mid-year assessment or the end of the year assessment. Those what the color-coded boxes to the far right of the form are. Next slide, please. That brings us to the performance goals, which are in Goal 1, Goal 2, and Goal 3. There should be 3 professional goals throughout the year, a minimum. And so, again, those are the SMART goals, where the employee and the supervisor, the person that's responsible for completing the performance appraisal, sits down with the employee and has that discussion about what the goals are for that employee for the upcoming year. It could be, for example, to close all investigations within 45 days of receiving all information, right? That's the example of a SMART goal. It's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, and it's time-bound. So that's an example of a SMART goal. Next slide. The next section are the 5 core competencies, and those core competencies, and you have to forgive me because I wear glasses and have to take them off to see this, it's so small. Accountability, adaptability, collaboration, customer focus, and problem solving. And each of these competencies we'll get to in a moment. There's a description in the form that talks about what each of these mean and what they are, so that as you are judging the competencies of the employee, you have some guidance as to what you are looking for when you are completing the evaluation. Next slide, please. And the last 2 competencies, these are for people leaders. And the classification of Inspector General would qualify as a people leader because there are people under that position in the organizational structure within the department or the organization. And those 2 competencies for leaders are building effective teams and managerial courage. And we'll talk again a bit about what each of these means in a moment. And then the last thing that's on the evaluation form is the professional development. And that's the goal where the employee and the supervisor set professional development goals for that year. Are there specific trainings that the employee wants to take to hone skills? Are there specific conferences that the employee wants to take or should take, or that the employee, in talking with the supervisor, determines that there's specific professional development that they want to complete within that upcoming year? And that goal is set here. Again, we don't penalize employees for not completing the professional development, particularly when it's not completed because they are doing the work. That is a goal that they should accomplish, but we know that when you are in a position such as this, an executive level position, the ability to break away sometimes is limited. The next section deals with the evaluation, feedback, and discussion. There's opportunity for the employee to provide some feedback and to have that discussion with the supervisor that is completing the appraisal. The employee and the manager both sign at the bottom acknowledging that overall performance rating. So all of this information bubbles down into an overall performance rating of 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And the employee and the supervisor will sign off on that. Next slide. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Many of us probably are familiar with these. These are pretty common in various industries. 1 is unsatisfactory. 2 means that improvement is needed. 3 means that the employee meets expectations. 4 means that the employee exceeds expectations. And then a 5 is exceptional. I referenced earlier about those competencies and that they have some guidance about what they mean. And I'd like to talk about that a bit. Accountability deals with the employee being transparent and honest, providing clear, concise, and relevant and timely information, that the employee aligns the things that they say and do, that there aren't any inconsistencies, that basically the employee is accountable to not only their supervisor, but to the people that they lead as well. The next one is adaptability, and that is the leader's ability to change behavioral style or method of approach when necessary to achieve a goal. We all know that things happen in the workplace, that despite our best intentions, we have to change gears sometime to accomplish the work. And this speaks to the employee's ability to, when facing the challenges of the job, to do what's necessary to achieve the work. Collaboration, this demonstrates respect and fairness. Does the employee treat people with dignity? Is the employee self-aware of his or her own actions and able to resolve interpersonal conflicts constructively? Does the employee share time, energy, and knowledge with others to ensure that they can succeed? And does the employee listen to ideas from others, even when those ideas are different from their own? Is this person a team player? There are some decisions, obviously, that those in leadership positions have to make, and they have to make those decisions and stand behind them. But the question here is whether or not this person is a team player, a collaborator, one who facilitates collaboration across the agency and across the enterprise when necessary. The next competency is customer focus, and that's, does the employee treat everyone as a customer? Does the employee listen to the customers, both internal and external, and address the needs and concerns of the customer? What I will say here is that all city employees have customers. Our customers are the citizens of Baltimore City. And so the look here and the evaluation point here is how the work that we do, how we treat the customer. The things that we do they advance the interests of the customer? If a customer calls, if a citizen calls, and a citizen has an inquiry or a complaint, are we taking the steps to address those issues with that citizen and responding back to that citizen with prompt customer service? And then lastly, problem solving. That speaks to an employee's ability to analyze and prioritize situations, to identify and solve problems, to provide solutions, and increase efficiency and improve quality in the service delivery. And those are the competencies that we look for in all city employees. There are two additional competencies that we focus on when we talk about people leaders. Next slide. And those are building effective teams and managerial courage. Building effective teams is just what it means. The ability to blend into teams when needed, the ability to access the team's needs and gaps, to create strong morale and spirit in teams, and to share wins and successes, but to also leverage those challenges to get better progressively as a team. And then managerial courage means that the person excels as a leader and a supervisor. They inspire and motivate employees to perform their best. They speak directly, honestly, and with respect of all stations. They provide timely feedback. They coach and counsel towards effective performance. They understand, enforce, and comply with city policies. And they stand their ground, making recommendations and sharing opinions. It's difficult sometimes to be a leader because I mentioned it earlier. You have to make the decisions, the hard decisions in the room sometimes that others don't agree with. And this speaks to the leader's ability to stand their ground and to follow those policies and procedures that they're required to, irrespective of how people might feel about it. So I will stop there. That's the contact information for my team that's here today. I'll stop there for any questions, because I'm sure there are some questions. And we have Amy Butwin and Joanne Ashton, who are the subject matter experts with respect to performance management.
Thank you, Quentin. You said you were going to discuss, I think yours is still on, I guess it's okay.
Yes.
You said you were going to discuss us evaluating her as a board.
Yes, and I do understand that there was legislation that created this board and that this board has the responsibility for evaluating the performance of the Inspector General. That's a bit unique in that there's not one direct supervisor, right? Nonetheless, it can be done. What it would require is that a quorum of the board at each step of the process participate. So there would be that initial meeting. That initial meeting is where you discuss setting those SMART goals and expectations for that upcoming year. Once those are set, there would be a mid-year evaluation. And recently we transitioned from a fiscal year evaluation period to a calendar year evaluation period. So we still have a little bit of lead time because as we transition to performance management in Workday, our goal was to be ready to really have these count beginning January of next year. And so the evaluations that are taking place now in the system are, while they count, we knew that this was going to be a year where people are logging in, they're getting familiar with the system, they're getting trained up on performance management, and that we would not have a majority of our employees that were complete performance management this year, 2023. The goal is that by January of 2024, employees will, more on a large-scale basis, be enrolled in the system, completing the initial assessments, the mid-year evaluations in June of next year, and then the end-of-the-year evaluations in December of next year.
That's great to know because I think you know our board is new. We've been reformatted, and part of what we're trying to do in the evaluation process is determine the process that we will use, how we will evaluate, and what the city's expectation was from us for this fiscal and calendar year. We were very concerned. So basically what you're saying is we should fully start implementing January 1 of next year.
Correct, but there are some things that you can be doing in the interim to prepare for that, okay? I know that there were some questions around, for example, whether or not the criteria and competency should be those that are articulated by the National Office of Inspector General's manual. And what I will say to that is those are technical requirements for a specific scope of work. And yes, you should consider those, but that is no different than our city solicitor, who is an attorney, and there are technical rules and requirements around the practice of law. Our health commissioner is required to be a medical doctor. There are very technical rules and regulations around the practice of medicine. Our fire chief is required to follow certain rules and regulations that are set out by NIASH and other safety organizations. And so what we do is the competencies that are in the policy are very broad, overreaching general competencies that you can back into with those more technical, specialized requirements. I'll give you an example. There may be some requirements and rules that speak to the work of an inspector general that speak to ethics, right? That would go to the accountability competency, right? Is this person following the rules, being accountable? So those competencies are general and broad enough where you can do the work of considering those more technical requirements in determining whether or not those general core competencies have been displayed in the performance of the work.
Yes, would you please come to the mic? Thank you.
So first question is, you just mentioned the city attorney, the health officer, the fire chief. Who evaluates them?
The respective deputy mayor or city administrator or deputy city administrator, who they report to in the.
Okay.
they report
See,
to.
when you look at this board, this is a volunteer board, meets 4 times a year. That's it. We don't interact with the inspector general on a daily basis. We don't interact with her on a monthly basis. So when I look at that list of all those competencies and how you evaluate, I think objectively, we probably won't be able to answer 95% of that. And it was my understanding that the purpose of this meeting, because of the unique situation we have here, is to try to tailor the evaluation to the unique situation here. Because, I mean, if you look at that, does anybody honestly think going through that, we are going to be in a position to fairly judge the office? We're not. And so that's why I struggle when I go through this. I struggle with it a lot because I go, okay, one of 2 things is going to happen. Either we're just going to blow through it and check a bunch of boxes, or we're just going to be paralyzed. So I don't know how anyone else feels, but that's my impression of it.
And before you answer, I mean, I had the same thought, and I wonder if this question will, lead into that. But I was wondering what process the team that reports to the Inspector General, what role they play in this. Like, do we have an opportunity to potentially meet with them, interview with them, or allow them to provide anonymous feedback for, at least in terms of evaluating her management capabilities. But also, I think that would shed some light on, the accountability and all the other elements that we're supposed to be evaluating.
Great question. 2 very great questions. Let me begin by saying, and I understand this is a very unique situation, right? While you do not evaluate or see the work that the inspector does on a day-to-day basis, that's why we have those multiple check-in points at various intervals throughout the year, which provide this body the opportunity to ask questions, to have the Inspector General provide that information. And to answer your question, you absolutely can ask subordinates. We call it a 360 evaluation. You can do that. I do that with my team to get a full picture of the leadership, because the reality is, even though my team reports directly to me, I don't see them every day, right? And I don't think you have to see a person every day to be able to ask the questions about where they are with goals that you work together to set, and what work they have completed that specifically can point back to their accomplishment of those goals. And this is not an opportunity to delve into every single act that an employee does. We're looking very broadly overall at their performance. The goals that were set, how did this employee do with meeting the goals that were set? And in meeting those goals, do we see that these competencies were displayed while they were doing that work, right?
So you did, earlier, you did kind of imply that we could work with the IG to develop the core competencies, minimum of 3, I'm assuming maximum of 5 or so. That's great, so that can address some of the concerns about the scope of what we're looking at. From what perspective, though, are we processing? The manager or the evaluator? Because those are the two signatures on the form. So from what role are we operating?
Great question. Let me first begin with the first part of your question. I think you referenced to work with her to set the competencies. You work with her to set the goals. The competencies are fixed, and you are the evaluators, right? Because the IG it's a bit unique because she's independent. So she doesn't report to you, right? You don't sign her timesheets, et cetera. She doesn't report to you. However, this board has been vested with the responsibility of evaluating her. And so you would be signing as the evaluator.
Are we required to follow this form? It seems quite granular. I agree with the comments of my colleagues that we're not well situated to provide that kind of granular evaluation in a more general way. We could certainly assess her overall effectiveness as measured against the requirements of statute, but are we bound by this form?
Yes, unfortunately, this is the performance management metric. And let me just say that what we don't want to create, and we certainly want the IG to have that level of independence, and we understand that is what precipitated, in many regards, this board's creation. We also don't want to create inequity either by having her being measured by a different measurement tool than other employees similarly situated.
So, the IG in this case is going to provide us with a self-assessment somewhere during the course of the review period. So that would be the bulk of what we use as an evaluation, whatever she says in this case. And so we're going to be.
Excuse me, as long as it goes back to the goals that we set
Right, we're going
with
to
her.
be set, yeah. That's going to be our discussion, our opportunity to have that discussion is when we receive her self-assessment.
No, we will set those goals before she
No,
does the self-assessment.
Yes, and she's going to provide the self-assessment based on those goals that we
Yes.
assess. So once we get the self-assessment, I'm trying to do a time frame, because you didn't talk too much about time frame. You did kind of give us an indication that January we should be doing something, have something in place. So can you speak a little bit more about
Sure.
giving us a specific time frame?
And I'll turn it over to Amy Butwin from my team, who can speak more to the timeline around when the self-assessment would be submitted.
So we're working on the timeline for 2024 specifically, but the standard timeline for each year is typically January. Goals are set. We ask that goals are set within the first 45 days of the calendar year to give all employees adequate time to work on accomplishing those goals. We then launch a mid-year review in June. And that's more of a conversation that is documented via the form, but it's really designed to be a formal touch point. How's the employee doing? Are they progressing towards their goals? Are they completing them? Are there any areas of concern that needs to be addressed? Things of that nature. And then when it's December, that's when we would launch we would request the self-evaluation for the annual review, which gives the board time then to complete the review based on that self-evaluation. The timelines we have are, it starts with the self-employee, it goes to the manager, but we give overall about from December to the end of January to complete that process.
Just one point of clarification. I thought I previously read, even on the form, that the evaluations were due June the 15th annually.
Yes.
So-
In prior years.
In prior years. We recently, when we switched to moving performance management into Workday, we switched to a calendar year performance cycle. So rather than it being fiscal year, it's calendar year. So the form that you may have seen was an old form, but for this meeting today and for your use, we have revised the form and taken all mention of fiscal year off because that no longer applies.
And as such, they also said that a lot of the employees had not been fully trained on the workday and the evaluation part of it. So for us, that means our job, we need to have our internal guidelines and procedures in place before January 1 of 2024. And then we will have 45 days to work with the OIG and set goals that we all agree with. And we do have the ability to take pieces from, for example, the National Organization of OIG, but also to just look at, in a way, it's kind of good because we will then have been this board for 6 months and we will have seen how the reports come out because we've already started seeing that. We will have looked at different things. We know about the software upgrades needed. We know what needs to be done for the Board of Estimates. So that should give us a good amount of time. One question I did have, she's overall responsible for the Board of Estimates and the Office of Inspector General. Board of Ethics, I'm sorry. Board of Ethics and Inspector General. Should we do two or join them together? Just one?
One.
Okay. Does anybody else? Yes.
So I had a question about the evaluators. You said that we would be the evaluators. So are you wanting all of us to sign that line, or are we appointing somebody?
It would be, typically it would be the chair of the board,
Okay.
right? That would be the signatory. But you would need a quorum for those touch points.
Right. And then, so who would be the manager? Because that's also something that needs to be filled out on a form.
That is where there is room for us to kind of decide how we want to do that. In Workday today,
Okay.
the IG has a manager in Workday on that org chart. That person could be tasked with putting in the assessment that this board approves into the system, or it can route to HR, and HR can put it in the system. We are agnostic as to how that mechanism occurs, but we're clear that the manager that's in Workday, that would be more of a perfunctory signature.
Okay. And then my last question is, with the chair signing off that signature as the evaluator, the chair also goes to the city council and?
No, we don't present her
Okay.
evaluation to the city council.
city council,
It
okay.
is only given to HR, and it does have some confidentiality
I was going to,
associated.
thank you for
Right,
that,
that's
Madam
why I was
Chair. I was
asking,
going to say,
okay.
this is, the performance of review for the IG is like the performance review for any other employee.
Mm-hmm.
It is confidential. It is protected by the Maryland Public Information Act. It cannot be disclosed. It cannot be shared. It goes into her personnel file.
Okay, that's what I wanted to verify. Thank you.
I have another question in regards to the 360 eval, because that's kind of what I had in mind when I asked the earlier question. For it to be a 360, are there also peers that we might have access to? Or, I mean, and I don't know how this is evaluated, but if there are public any way that public feedback is collected or, the customers? Because, that would allow us to provide, to understand a more complete picture when we're making the evaluation.
But don't forget, a lot of her customers are anonymous.
Right.
So it's just, I'll let you go. But come on up, Isabel. Some are anonymous, and Isabel wants, some are also law enforcement that are associated with subpoenas. You want to pick it up, Isabel?
I just want to say the last evaluation, they actually opened it up to the public, and actually 135 people responded to the board at that time. So they asked for comments during the process, and it would be sent to, because you all now have a email address, so the comments would be sent to your email address. So you could do it that way. My other-
Absolutely,
yeah,
but the
my other
clients
question is,
themselves.
can the Inspector General release it too? Can I release my evaluation?
If you choose to release it, and again, I think that would be a question we would probably have to get advice from the solicitor's office, because that's a question of the PIA, and I don't want to provide legal advice, but it's your document, so.
I know, it was released last time.
Yeah.
So.
May I say,
You got it.
I was going to ask that same question, because right now, the last one is on the website, and because it's a personnel action, or, how
But,
did it,
but
should it
if
be
you
removed
notice, it did not follow any city format.
from? No.
So
But it's deemed as,
we're a new board.
yeah. Okay.
We want to make sure we put in place, and yes, we'll have to figure out how to do a lot of things, but we want to make sure we put in place to follow
Okay.
properly city guidelines.
Right.
And even though she's independent, she is still a city employee.
That's correct.
may I say, one way or another, it seems to me, the public has a right to know whether this board has provided a satisfactory evaluation, has deemed the Inspector General's performance to be satisfactory. So maybe it's this form that remains confidential, or she could release it, but in some summary fashion, we should be able to report to the public what we found. I think that's the essence of this oversight board.
One of our charges is to present to the Board of Estimates every year,
City council.
to the city council, on the activities of the, of the IG. So at that time, we would make mention, I would imagine, that evaluation was conducted and it was satisfactory, blah, blah, blah.
But I also just want to make sure we're delineating between the performance of the Inspector General herself and
Yes.
the performance of the office. Because we are the board for the office overall as well, which maybe that is what we talk about, how to evaluate
Right.
to present publicly, right?
Right, because she does release the, what's it called every year?
Actually, it's specified in the law that you are the evaluators of just the Inspector General.
But you also,
I evaluate all my people.
no, the report, your yearly report.
Oh, my annual report, yeah.
But she also releases an annual report that goes to the public,
Mm-hmm.
and it is very specific in highlighting how many open cases they were, how many were closed. I don't believe it goes into resolutions, but options, or it kind of depends, because you don't do a resolution on every single case.
Well, we do post how much money was either found or saved, as well as we do post if the person was no longer working for the city. We try to do summaries of the cases, and every case is actually published on our website. We try to be as transparent as possible for the citizens.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because there needs to be clarity for everyone. We are not evaluating the office. We are evaluating the person who is in a job description that says they are the head of the Office of Inspector General.
And let me just say that I am not intimately familiar with the ordinance, and so I do think that it would merit getting an opinion or that question going to the law department, because what I would hate to have happen is for this board to release information that violates the PIA Act and find ourselves in precarious situation, even despite the Inspector General saying that she wants to release it, I still think we need to make sure that we're clear on what information this board can release and to whom, and what information is left up for the Inspector General to release if she so chooses.
Any other questions, comments? Do we feel like we have a better handle now on what our job is going forward? We do know it's going to take some thinking to figure out how to do things, correct? And we really appreciate the fact that you came and did the presentation, because we needed to hear it from the horse's mouth, especially since the last evaluation that was released in the news or wherever it was, we all read it and it didn't follow the format at all. As part of our reconstruction of the board, we want to make sure we set the correct guidelines and procedures so that we're not accused of anything that we didn't do. And that's why we really needed HR. Okay. Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am.
And we actually made copies.
Oh,
of
wonderful.
The presentation for each one of you all to have, so I'm gonna give you those.
Wonderful.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, we got a lot of work to do.
I had a question. Who serves as the perfunctory manager in Workday for the IG?
That manager currently is the chief of staff to the mayor.
Okay.
Isabel, do you have a desk for Ralph in the office?
Do we have a what?
Do you have a desk for Ralph in your office so he can evaluate you?
No, absolutely not.
Thank you so much, and we really appreciate it. And we really appreciate the fact that you took the time to meet with us outside of hours, because we all have other things.
And like we said, we'll come back if you want to.
I can't hear you.
Oh, it's on. So like we said, we'll come back and, kind of talk through any questions that you may have. How are we going to set up that 360 evaluation?
Yes.
Because we need to set a standard template once we do that.
Yes.
So those questions should be consistent across the board. Okay.
And then become almost like part of our charter, so.
Check-ins?
Yes, the next board members that come before us won't be in the same situation we're in.
Sure.
Oh, one more thing, though. When it comes time to do the evaluation, I think you touched on this, Quentin. You said it either could be given to HR or given to the manager.
Yeah, the person that's the manager in the system, we are committed to working with this board to determine what works best.
Okay.
And that's something that we can discuss as we get closer to that point where we're doing the evaluations, what makes better sense to do.
And also, how would we enter the goals? How would we enter the information in the form? Would it be through?
It's a fillable form that you will receive.
The Excel form.
The Excel form is a fillable form where you can type in the goals and you can type in all the information.
But will we receive it via email?
Yeah, because
Even
remember,
though
you
we're
won't
not
have access
sitting.
to Workday.
Right.
So you're going to get the form in Excel.
Okay.
And then that way you'll enter it on
You'll
there.
enter it in, and then
we'll
once
retain
it gets to the designated manager,
Yes.
that designated manager will take it from the form and will put it into Workday in the system.
Okay. Did you have another question?
No.
But yes, we'll definitely have to have you back again, okay? Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Yep.
Thank you. Have a
Okay.
good evening, everyone.
You too. Okay. All right, everybody, you want to go back real quick? We need to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Did everybody review them? Or was there anything that needed to be changed?
Not really.
Okay.
So we have to spell check it, I'm told, so. besides-
Yes, spell checking, I don't know about the rest of y'all. We all can spell, but there are always days that our fingers and our minds don't exactly work together on a computer. Okay, Could I have a motion to accept those minutes once the spell check is completed? Do I have a second?
Second.
I'd really like to ask everybody to really review this again and digest it. And the subcommittee, if anybody would like to join, because you can continue, would you like to speak to the subcommittee, Ralph? You have to come to the speaker.
The comment he made about there has to be a quorum who are involved in this evaluation process, so.
Not involved, a quorum that agrees to the goals, then to the review. Each step has to have a quorum, which means it has to be presented to the board for good understanding. But I think we need to define how we're going to even get to the point of the goals
Right.
first.
So the first is time frame. We have to lay out a time frame.
Yeah.
And so the first thing I need to get to is arranging time with the IG to get her feedback on when she could develop.
No, because her goals aren't due until January of
Right,
2024.
but I'm gonna,
I think we need to figure out how we're going to come up with goals and come with a timeline so that everybody understands to be, and documented, voted on, and put into our record before we actually start trying to set the goals.
Yeah, and
Because
that's-
things we need to think about, I don't know if everybody has read or remember everything that was in the
presentation.
national OIG guidelines. So we have to keep those in line. I
Right.
think, but we need to set a time when we as a committee can review what the subcommittee submits to us. Does anybody else have any
That's gonna
thoughts
be
on
the
that?
next meeting, but yeah, I got you.
I think we definitely need to do that, and I think one of the other questions we should really discuss in that subcommittee is we should make a recommendation around who receives the, who serves as that kind of perfunctory supervisor to input, whether it's chief of staff. They also, remember, the HR folks offered that they could do it too. And so I think for me is a question around like that, to maintain that independence outside of the mayor's office. We should have that discussion
And fully
okay.
document it.
and fully
So
document that.
That's
a
why
good
I'm saying, let's take it up a step.
Right.
Okay.
And try to fully document getting the wording correctly, and then everybody could vote on the procedure and the processes. And now that we understand what the form looks like, we have to put on a form brain to figure out how to make
So
everything
it's
fit
Jim,
in.
myself, Jim, and Brittany,
And Gary.
and Gary, and there was one more person that I forgot to mention on the first one. Was it four?
I can't remember, but
Okay.
anybody who wants to join and is going to really attend the meetings, you just need to reach out.
So,
Okay.
yeah, and so Jim was just talking about frequency of meetings, but it looks like we're going to, between now and December, we're probably going to have to throw in at least, say, 3 meetings? Just,
I think we need to see how far the subcommittee can go before.
right, that's what I'm talking about, the
Yeah.
subcommittee.
Oh, you 3 meetings of the subcommittee.
Right, uh-huh. Is you guys who are already on there, or you think that's too much, you're available, or is it not enough?
I mean, that sounds close to what we need to ensure we're ready by January. Because remember, once we have 45 days from January 1st, essentially, to submit everything. So, that sounds about right. And we also remember we have to take into account December's essentially shot. So,
Absolutely. All right, so
Okay.
why don't you, the subcommittee, why don't you send out a notice of when y'all are going to meet again, and anybody that would like to join you can then respond.
Do that?
And any more questions on this piece? I think we got a lot to digest, and I think there'll be more questions forthcoming. Okay, just a brief update on the funding for the new automated system. It is still in the process. It does not look like it'll be in place when we were hoping for, but it is still moving. So I'd like to have Brian Bartz give us a report at the next meeting, when he'll have more information on where they are in the actual procurement process, and hopefully when they start implementation. Okay. Were there any, one critical piece, speaking of ethics. Y'all better do your ethics forms. In case you don't know who you are, do you know who you are? I know who you are. Brittany, Lauren, have not, and Renee. So please complete all 4 of the ethics teaching and testing units, okay? ASAP, please. Okay, is there anything else? No. Anything else? I think we had a very successful meeting, and I like the timing of it. So, we'll see each other at the next meeting, and please, those ethics forms are very, very important, because we will be in violation if they're not completed.
My apologies, I thought that they were.
Yeah, I thought I had the same issue. I thought I had done everything in number 4, but I was just missing one.
That'd be part of it.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think the email will tell you, but I think it tells you the whole part 4, and then you have to go down yourself and look at it to determine. Hold on a second.
It looks like Lauren is just missing the training.
Okay.
So it's just the training for Brittany and Lauren. Dean Hutchins, we need everything from.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'll try to reach out to her. Is there any other business? Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
And could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I motion to adjourn.
Second. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.